本日のトーク、コレクションの新しい形、現代美術作品収集の今と、題して、お送りいたします。最初にですね、本日の登壇者の皆さんをご紹介いたします。前の方に座っていらっしゃいますので、順番にご紹介いたしますと、ハンネフケンス財団の代表創設者でありますハンネフケンスさんです。それからナショナルギャラリーシンガポールおよびシンガポール美術館の館長でいらっしゃいますユージンタンさんです。そして、香港エムプラス美術館のミュージアムディレクターでいらっしゃいますスハーニャ・ラフェルさん。そして、当館館長の片岡真実です。本日はですね、2時間、設けてございますが、最初にですね、当館館長の片岡よりご挨拶を申し上げます。では片岡館長、よろしくお願いします。
皆様こんばんは。先ほどご紹介いただきました森美術館館長の片岡です。今日はですね、詳しく後ほどハンネフケンスさんの方からお話しいただきますけれども、2021年にハンネフケンス財団と、それからシンガポールのシンガポールアートミュージアム、それから香港の M プラスと森美術館の3館で共同で新しい映像作品をコミッション、新作を作ってもらうというその制作委託をして、それを収集していくという新しい試みを始めました。で、もともとはその2回目のセレクションの審査をですね、昨日実はやったんですけれども、こうしたそのコレクションを共有していく、あるいは新作を依頼してそれを共有していくという考え方が今後の美術館の収集ということ、そして収集保存ということを考えていく上で非常に興味深いなというふうに思っていまして、で、世界中を見渡すとそうした新しい事例も増えてきております。それはどの美術館も収蔵庫に限界があってたくさんひたすら集めればいいというわけでもないということもあり、それからもちろん収集予算が潤沢にいつまでもあるわけではないというような事情もあって、どういうふうに美術館の活動をサステイナブルなものにしながら、目の前にある現実的な条件とともにそれを続けていくことができるのかという大きな問いを突きつけられているということがあり、多くの美術館で似たような状況なんです。なので、それに新しい一石を投じるようなプロジェクトになるのではないかというふうに思っていて、その他の事例や、それから各館の事情も違いますから、そうした話も聞きながら、そしてハンネフケンさんがなぜこうしたモデルを考え始めたのかというあたりを今日は聞いていきたいと思います。ではよろしくお願いいたします。
では続きましてですね、ハンネフケンスさんにプレゼンテーションをいただきます。ハンネフケンス財団はバルセロナに拠点を置く、財団でして、映像作品のプロダクションコミッションに特化した活動を最近はされているとのことですけれども、財団の活動についてですね、プレゼンテーションをお願いしたいと思います。ではネフケンスさん、よろしくお願いします。
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for coming. I'm so happy to see that there are so many people who are interested in the theme of today, collecting and new ways of collecting. Before I start, I would like to thank Mami very much for the wonderful hospitality that she has shown. I would like to thank Ken and his team for the incredibly professional and thoughtful way in which they have guided us through these days. And so in my case, I would really like to talk about my voyage from collecting art to producing art so that art institutions can collect art. I'm relatively new at this game, really, because I started only 23 years ago in 1999. I did not collect any contemporary art at the time, and I was in Paris just on a little holiday, and I walked through the city and saw an exhibition that was announced at the Musée d'Art de la Ville de Paris that was called Remake of the Weekend by an artist called Pipi Lottirist. I didn't know her, but I thought that her name was kind of funny, and that seduced me to go into the museum. And there I saw video installations that were projected onto a kitchen and into a living room, huge images of Pipi Lottirist herself rolling through wet grass, the flowers that were blooming there. And I must say that the sound of her singing sort of transformed me into her little universe. And I felt that wet grass on my skin, and I smelled the blossom that I could see in her video. And before I knew it, I'd spent 2.5 hours in the universe of Pipi Lottirist. And when I came out of it, I said, I want to be part of this world. But how am I going to be part of that world? Because I'm not an artist. So I thought that one way would be to collect art, but show the art that moves me to other people. But how do you go about that? So for 1 year, I investigated all sorts of different options. Many museum directors in the Netherlands at the time were not even interested in having a cup of coffee with me because I was unknown, and they really didn't want to start collaborating with somebody they didn't know about. But there was one director, Charles X from the museum, the Centraal Museum in Utrecht, who did start to talk with me. And with him, I started to collect art that would go on long-term loan as a promised gift to the museum. And a promised gift means that when I'm no longer there, the art will stay in the museum. Our first adventure was to go to Art Basel to see if our tastes were really very similar, because if he had very different tastes from mine, there wouldn't be much reason in collaborating. So I went into Art Basel, and I was again seduced by the sound that I heard of Pipi Lottirist singing, and moved to one of her videos. And we had agreed to be 2 hours looking around and then meet again, but I spent almost all that time again in the universe of Pipi Lottirist. And then when I came out of it, we met. Charles X said, I would like to show you a work that I think is really good and would be something that our museum needs. And that turned out the work by Pipi Lottirist. So that was the first major artwork I bought, and that was shown at the Centraal Museum. Charles X moved to the Museum Boijmans van Beuningen in Rotterdam. And I'm from Rotterdam. I was originally born there, and I was raised in Rotterdam. So I was very happy to be able to collaborate with him there in my native city. But this time the collaboration was a little bit different, because we started to produce art together with the curators of the museum. We would sit around the table. The curators would have different suggestions of artists that we could work with. And I would be there really from the inception of the idea of the artwork until it was finally made. And one of the observations I made in those early days was that the original idea is always going to be much different from the product that comes out of it, because the whole process of making art is open and it's organic, so there's always a bit of a surprise there. But from that time on, I decided that producing art would be so much more interesting. It would be much more of a total experience, that I stopped buying art and I started to produce art. And in 2016, I decided, I have to say we decided, because when I say we, it really is Hilde Teerlink, who is the president of my foundation. I'm not the president of the foundation. I have not much to say there. Hilde is the president. Hilde and I decided to focus on video art. One of the reasons, of course, is that it was my first love, as was obvious with the Pipi Lottirist purchase, but also because I feel that video art is really an art that moves particularly young people, and also particularly in Asia. And there's very little financing available for video art worldwide, so there's a need to be fulfilled there. Also, I think I'm attracted to video art because, as a writer, I like a narrative. And video art allows for that narrative because of the time that a video has. There could be a span of a story that's being told. And then there's a very practical element, and that is that with video art you do not have to pay transportation, you don't have to pay insurance costs. With the click of a button you can move a video from one place of the world to the other. Those are the practical reasons why we chose video art, but there's another way we started to work. Rather than commissioning a work, producing a work, and then finding art institutions to show their work, we decided to do it the other way around, to find different art institutions and together with them choose an artist and give the artist a commission to work, and then show the work to different art institutions. Now, that sounds perhaps like a very logical thing to do, but what it really entails is that an art institution has to commit to showing a work that's not even there. So really, I have to say that the art institutions that we work with, the partners we work with, share the same sense of adventure that I am so keen of. This is not something for everybody. We now have 6 or 7 grants, and the one we're talking about today is really the first big grant that we're having, and the grant that we're having with 3 really very important Asian museums. So I must say that I feel very honored that these museums want to work with me. And the experience has been very pleasurable. As Mami has pointed out, this is the first for all 3 museums. So, and as Suhanya said, we're really pioneers. I feel very emboldened by that speech, that all of a sudden I'm going to be a pioneer. I like that very much. And I think the way we work is really all about trust. It is trust among the different art institutions. It's trust in the artist that's going to be chosen. It really is a vote of confidence in a sense. You know, we choose an artist and we give the artist the opportunity to produce a new work that will be shown at those 3 different art institutions. But with that, we say, we believe in you. And quite frankly, I feel that that's just as important part of what we're doing than the financial support and even the providing of the platforms. I can imagine that an artist that's working in their studios, who are never quite sure how the work is going to be received, and to be given this trust, this vote of confidence, is a real boost. So yesterday we had our meeting, and when I say a selection committee, that may sound like it's something that's really very competitive, but I'm also very proud of the way that we are collaborating, truly. Because everything happens in harmony. This is a very important part for me, that the things we do happen in harmony. And I think that this can happen that way because the 3 art institutions really put the well-being of their institution first. When we look, or when they look at the different candidates, because I myself do not have a vote in this, it's the art institutions among themselves who decide. When they look at the different candidates, the question is always, is this somebody that we like to show in our institution? Is this somebody that our public would be interested in? And in this case, of course, is this something that fits in our collection? 3 different art institutions with different collections, and to come to a choice really means that generosity is needed for all 3 of you, and I find that in abundance, so I would like to thank you for that. You know, one of the most pleasurable things is that when we start our process of selecting an artist, we get the dossiers of so many different artists, and we look through them, we see all these videos, and we get to know all these different artists that we might not have known before. And this is really a bit like heaven when you're interested in video art, to receive all of a sudden 30 dossiers of different artists and look through them, and on our computers we can see them again and again. This is such a luxury. And I think it's also a luxury for the art institutions, because if they had to put all the effort into finding all these different candidates, that would be time-consuming, and it would also be expensive. So this is another part of the sharing process, I think, the sharing of the information of the different artists. And of course, for an artist, it's also very helpful that even if they do not get the commission, they're being shown to different art institutions. They're already then on the radar, as it were. I can actually continue talking for a very long time about what I feel so very passionate about. I was given far more time than the other people, my friends from our adventure, and I feel a bit bad about that. Why should I get so much more time than they do? So I would like to talk a little bit about young people who would be interested in collecting, because there's this idea that collecting art is really only for people who have a lot of money. And that idea is born because when you look in the media and you see a billionaire who buys a work for 20, 30 million, you obviously think buying art is not for me. But those are the exceptions, really. And a way to collect would be to form a group of people, of friends, of neighbors, 10 people, put in each 150,000 yen, which is about $1,000 each year, and connecting with a curator of a museum that might appeal to you and see what you can do with that money. Because particularly for emerging artists, 10,000 or 1,500,000 yen could be a big amount. You could, among each other, produce a work that can be shown in the museum. If you want to, you could actually share the work and have it in the different homes for a while. You could help the artist by financing a catalog or another kind of publication. You could help the artist by sending him or her abroad for a residency, or you can invite an artist over to come here in a residency. You could get involved, and because it's not so much about possessing. Possessing is only part of it, but it's about the process. It's about the fact that you're doing something together with other people, you share something. And I am so absolutely convinced that for us human beings, the fact that we feel part of something that's a little bit bigger than ourselves makes us feel so very good. And sharing is a part of that. So I would really say that collecting art together with other people helps you to feel part of something bigger. Now I'd like to read a piece that I wrote. I'm a writer. I have a blog. You can find it on hannefkens.com. I'm going to make a bit of publicity here for myself. and I put a new piece on the blog every 2 weeks. And this week I put a piece that was written after I visited the Sharjah Art Biennale in the United Arab Emirates, and I was very inspired by that. And I feel that this piece really expresses why I do what I want to do and why I am so excited about our collaboration here as well. The piece is called To Possess Other Eyes. And I need my extra pair of eyes to see it. The taxi that took me from Sharjah to Dubai stood still at a traffic light. Next to us, I noticed a bus transporting Pakistani workers from a construction site to their barrack-like lodgings on the outskirts of the city. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, smiled at me. I smiled back, triggering the game I played as a child, where I imagined I could enter the heads of passers-by to experience life as they did. I traveled with this Pakistani man to the small room he shares with 5 others. Laundry hanging from the bunks and a whirring fan that does little to relieve the stifling heat, and a photo of his wife and 2 daughters back in Punjab, stuck to the cracked mirror he uses to shave every morning. Proust said that the only true voyage would be not to visit strange lands, but to possess other eyes, to see the hundreds of universes that each of them sees. But imagining the world of this worker is not the same as possessing his eyes. However hard I try to part with my preconceptions, my imagination is informed by all my previous experiences, by what I've seen directly or on a screen. These images are the building materials of my fantasy. I may never be able to imagine something I have not, in some sense, already experienced. The awe of discovering the unknown is the most exhilarating experience I can have. And that's why I get so excited when I see the video of the artists we work with. A young Thai woman floats under the sea's surface, the ribbon of her white dress swirling while small marigolds slowly descend onto her. An unmanned boat mysteriously catches fire and floats on the Mekong River like a giant torch. A lone truck drives through an empty Georgian landscape at dusk. A Turkish policeman caresses his handgun with gentle strokes, as if it were his lover. A girl with cropped hair leans casually against a yellow cab in a Los Angeles parking lot, while the orange and green neon signs of a convenience store flickers into the night. The most wonderful thing is that I can share my excitement about these new images with the audiences of the different art institutions we collaborate with all over the world. For the duration of the video, we can all pretend we possess other eyes, even though we know better. Thank you very much.
今回の、コミッションのプロジェクトに、関わっております3館の、館長よりそれぞれの、館のですね、コレクションについて、簡単に、プレゼンテーションを行っていただきます。
Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Mami, and all the Mori team as well. I would like to enhance what Hans has said because it's been such a hospitable experience. And as he said, this is a very new thing for all of us to be embarking on. And I think the sense of, real hospitality, shared values, shared vision, and trust, shared food, very good food, helps us also think about, really what artists do, which is nourish our world. And we're here to talk about new ways of collecting, and we decided I would go first because I am the youngest institution to come online of Singapore Art Museum and Mori and M Plus. In many ways, we opened the museum in November 2021 in Hong Kong. But I always say that when we opened the museum, we were 10 years old. We'd already been functioning in the community in different ways while waiting for the building to come. But a museum is far more than a building. It's many things. And we have this wonderful description for the museum. Or our museum is called M+, and it means museum and more, M+. And it's part of a vision that was put together long before I started by actually a museum advisory group led by Victor Lowe, who became my first museum chairman, which was really a cross-disciplinary, transnational intention for the 21st century, a museum of visual culture that's dedicated to collecting, exhibiting, researching, publishing on design and architecture, moving image, and visual art. So this cross-disciplinary interest has generated a really unique institution, including an architecture as well. So I'm just going to talk about how we have thought about a museum in the 21st century in Hong Kong, a global museum with a very local root, and how that intention was first expressed through digital means, and the moving image has been an intrinsic part of that. So visual culture includes digital culture, and it is at the heart of what we do as well. And so if you look at, for example, our collections, the collections also trace new media, moving image, digital art as historic from our home in Asia. And being an institution of design and architecture as well as moving images and art, it is a very expanded canon, a new canon. So you see here an image of our design galleries, which has the first emoji archive, together seeing, and we show it right next door to Chow Fei's RMB City, which is really, I would say, the first artwork that went into the idea of a metaverse before metaverse becomes our reality today. Another set of works that looks at what this might lead to, Yang He Chang Heavy Industries in our Focus Gallery, which is a very beautiful concrete chapel. But we also showed the work of Beeple. So you can see how this is tracing across digital, metaverse. This is, Beeple's work is the first work on the blockchain, if you like, a kinetic sculpture of a human being, but it comes against the background of works that the audience is seeing in the museum that is dedicated to an expanded idea of what moving images, digital work might look like. We also have a dedicated space in our Moving Image Center, which includes 3 cinemas and a mediathek. And the mediathek, we are able to pull up a catalogue of more than 250 single-channel moving image works for audiences to search and play. So it's another exhibition space, if you like, because there are curated programs on there as well, but it is a way of searching and seeing moving image works for the collection. We also have a space called the Cabinet, which came out of the idea of the Wunderkammer. And it is a collection, a space that is really open storage. And we're able to show, again, a range of works that are sitting next to each other and that people bring their own interpretations to how, when objects sit next to each other, what they offer, citing one of the earliest sort of museum techniques of the Wunderkammer. We move on to then how we have also, I just wanted to show how we look at other aspects of moving image from the collection, how we've collaborated, for example, with the MMCA in Seoul, in Korea, where during COVID times, we wanted to take our single channel moving image collections out into the living rooms of people. And we did this program called Watch and Chill, thinking of Netflix and how Netflix is a very limited way of seeing moving image work. So we wanted to curate for audiences in their living rooms a Watch and Chill program. And we're just now launching some commissioning of Hong Kong videographers called Hong Kong as Mise en Scène to create views of the city. I wanted to show you different ideas of how commissioning also works within the museum. And to tell you that our digital team is part of our curatorial department because it's content driven. And they work very closely with the curators on what that content looks like, including how we bring to the online experience major works from the collections, like our Botanvalis, the Duchamp work, as collections being enhanced for teaching and for general viewing. Which leads me to how we built our collection online. We prepared a collection beta, open source, so that the collection is available for everybody to see, and we made that available from 2019 onwards. What does our collection look like? Right now, we're just under 8,500 objects and 51,000 archives. And the M+ collection archives are primarily dedicated to architecture collections and some of the design collections. So it's a very substantial founding collection. And what you see there is the geography that that collection spans. Our website went online exactly 1 year before we opened in 2020 and is multilingual. We are very clear that our audiences come with very different language skills, and we have to make that available for them. And we have also initiated 2 very important projects, one in collaboration with the Asia Art Archive, which is a Wikipedia editathon, where we put online, we began by putting female Asian artists, because we know everybody goes to Wikipedia to find out things, and we wanted to make that available to broader audiences. And then the hackathons, which are really working with digital scholars and makers to play with our collection and make them interpret the M+ collections through these hackathons. We also do a program called M+ Matters, and the most recent one was looking at how to build a better metaverse. And we do this as in-person and as online interactives, knowing that the metaverse is also now a space of digital experimentation, but also where many moving image artists are moving into. And we do reach audiences where they are, and our audiences are very young. 77% of our audiences are under the age of 44, actually between 18 and 44. And our online and physical visitation, this is just a snapshot of the 1st of January to the 31st of December 2022. The physical visitation was just over 2 million people. And I want to remind you that 4 of those months we were closed due to the 5th wave of COVID in Hong Kong. But I also show you the online visitation. We have 4 channels that are just for mainland China. And so the 48 million is that audience, which is actually a fraction of a mainland audience. But I'm going to end by saying that our building is in itself encompasses an advanced digital screen. Two shots here, one of Nalini's work in search of vanished blood, which was actually the little typo there, 2021, 2022. And then the most recent facade commission was with Pipi Lottie-Rist, Hand Me Your Trust. But I wanted to show you the facade looks like with a work that we commissioned Ellen Pao, the senior Hong Kong artist, to make during deep in COVID last year. And she made this very beautiful work called, I just forget the name now. It'll come to me, but the work actually is a signing. It's a silent screen, of course, and she's signing the Heart Sutra for the people of Hong Kong on that screen. And it was a really poetic and very important work for the museum, for the artist, for our co-commissioners. We worked with Art Basel and UBS to make this work together, and it is a work that has now also entered the collection. So there are many channels through which these works come, and I just wanted to show you some of those opportunities, the commissioning, as well as the co-commissioning that we're now doing as part of, I think, what a 21st century museum could be, should be, must be as we move forward. So I will stop there. Thank you.
はい、スハーニャさんどうもありがとうございました。続きまして、ユージン・タンさんに、プレゼンテーションを行っていただきます。今回、ユージンさんは、シンガポールアートミュージアムのディレクターとして、審査にご参加いただいておりますが、今日はですね、彼が、館長を務めますもう一つのインスティテューション、ナショナルギャラリーシンガポールのコレクションも含めましてプレゼンテーションをいただきます。
I was just telling Suhanya that I'm looking forward to visiting M Plus later next month because I haven't had a chance to do so yet. That looked really exciting. Well, I myself want to thank Mami, Ken, and the team for taking care of us so well, and also to Han and Hilda for working with us on this commission. Thank you very much. So today, I know it says on the opening slide that I'll be speaking about Singapore Art Museum, or SAM, but I want to also speak about the other museum that I'm director of, the National Gallery Singapore, to talk a bit about the different collections and how they differ from each other. So here is an image of the National Gallery Singapore, which opened in 2015, so we're celebrating our 8th anniversary this year. And the focus of the National Gallery is really the art of Singapore and Southeast Asia. And through our collections, we really aim to present the art historical development of art in Southeast Asia. We look at the shared historical impulses and also the complexities between the ideas of national and regional art histories. In doing so, we also kind of complicate these ideas of region and regionality, and especially thinking of how we can understand Southeast Asia both as a geopolitical entity. As we know, Southeast Asia is really defined by ASEAN, Association of Southeast Asian Nations, which now comprises 11 countries. But Southeast Asia is also an imaginary. It's situated south of China and east of India. That's how it got its name in the post Second World War period. So how the art of the region really responds to this idea of geopolitics as well as imaginary. So our collections begin in the 19th century when most of Southeast Asia came under colonial rule. And artists such as Raden Saleh and Wan Luna were some of the very first artists from Southeast Asia to get recognized in Europe, winning major awards. And so this is a gallery of our 19th century collection. Then it moves on to the earlier 20th century where the modernist artists began to emerge in the region. These artists from Singapore, Chen Wenxi and Liu Kang, who were very much inspired by the French post-impressionism having come from Shanghai. in the later part of the 20th century, we see artists beginning to invent their own language. Here, Fandi on the left and Sujoyono, who started making art for their own, to try and break away from the European colonial influence. And also we see the invention of very unique styles and modes of art making. For example, painting on silk that was really invented in the in the Vietnamese art school that was started by the French, by Le Faux, and also lacquer painting, something very unique coming out of Vietnam. We see internationalism in the 1960s and 70s, artists like Fernando Zobel, but also someone like Latif Mohidin, who really invented kind of vernacular styles of abstraction. There was also social realism, reflecting the influence of our socialist ideals in Southeast Asia as well. And then, artists in the 90s and early 2000s who started redefining what art is and its relationship to societies. So artists like Montian Bunma, and on the right, artists by Recruit Terra Venetia. So it really tells the story of art from the 19th century to the present day in Southeast Asia. So that's the collection of the National Gallery Singapore. The other museum that I oversee in Singapore is the Singapore Art Museum, or SAM. So this is where we are now. Some of you who have visited SAM in the past may recognize it as a colonial period schools, but those buildings are under renovation now. So we've now moved to this port district, and we're taking up part of the warehouses in this building here. So unlike the National Gallery Singapore, SAM is a contemporary art museum. And we want to build a collection of contemporary art that is situated in Singapore, but rooted by the region, which is Southeast Asia, but also connected to the world so that we can explore global issues of today in a very incisive and nuanced way. And we see the contemporary really as a way to address issues of today by shifting and seeing how we can learn from local and regional modes of knowledge production. So an artist like Ho Zun Yan from Singapore, which many of you may be familiar with because Mami has shown his work quite a lot here at the Mori as well. Someone like Charles Lim, who was represented Singapore at the Venice Biennale in 2015, and there's a picture of his pavilion and the works which are now in our collection. So that's actually a buoy that which is supposed to be submerged in the water at some point. So that again goes towards, speaks about the difficulties of collecting contemporary art, which we'll get to later. Because our conservators will never allow us to put this back into the sea, for example. Right? Some of the other videos that he's made since his Venice presentation. Also works by Haegyu Yang. Then these works were commissioned for the Singapore Biennale, which just ended, and which has subsequently entered our collection as well. Zulkifli Mahmud, a Singapore artist, who makes his sound installations, and some other Malaysian artists. Maria Taniguchi, a Filipino artist. And also Cora Crit, I think you also showed this in Sun Shower, if I'm not wrong. But another work which is also in our collection. So it's also digital works, similar to how Suhania's M+ collects them. Also, artists whose works have a strong relationship to Southeast Asia, like Yan Vo. And this work by Hito's Style Factory of the Sun, which is currently showing at SAM right now as well. So this gives you a sense of the different collections and the differences between the two museums. Thank you.
はい、ユージンさんありがとうございました。続きまして、片岡館長の方から、森美術館のコレクションについて、プレゼンテーションさせていただきます。
では日本語で I'll be speaking in Japanese 今エムプラスとそれからシンガポールの ナショナルギャラリー、そしてシンガポールアートミュージアムのコレクションについて説明をしていただきましたけれども、森美術館は、もちろん国立の美術館でもなく、一企業が持っている美術館ですから、スケールは全然小さいので、もうちょっと小さな話をしますね。森美術館、ご存知の通り、今、この六本木ヒルズ森タワーの、53階にありますけれども、20年が経ちました。で、2003年にオープンをしたんですけれども、多くの美術館の成り立ちと違うのは、特にこのプライベートな美術館の場合には、コレクター、あるいはこの企業の創設者のような人のコレクションがですね、公に公開されるために、ビルを建ててそれを見せていくという、そういう流れが最も自然なんですけれども、森美術館が非常にそのプライベートミュージアムの中でもユニークな事例だなというふうに私が思っているのは、創設者の森実、元会長、そして森喜子現理事長がですね、現代美術館を作りたいというふうに思ったのは、この六本木ヒルズ全体を開発する時のコンセプトとして、文化都心というコンセプトを立てて、文化を中心にこの街を発展させていくという考え方から始まっています。で、したがって、会社は本当にその社会のために存在しているのであって、森ビルの存在意義というものは、社会のためにどういう貢献ができるのか。そして、この地域や都市をどのように育てていけるのかというようなことが、この森ビルの根底にはありますから、その中で、新しいものを作っていく、あるいは世界に発信していくというような意味合いで、最初からですね、現代美術館を目指していたんですね。どの時代でもよくて美術館があればいいということではなくて。で、従ってコレクションを集めてから、美術館を始めるというのではなくて、まず美術館を作って、で、そこで企画展を中心とした美術館にしていきましょうと。このモデルは、ヨーロッパではクンストハーレとも言われて、コレクションを持つのがミュージアム、クンストミュージアムであるのに対して、建物だけを持って、展覧会をしていくという、そういう、コンセプトで始めました。で、ところがですね、この2003年になので、ノンコレクティングミュージアムとして始まったんですけれども、先ほど来、この、展覧会のために作品をコミッションしていくという話をしていて、で、現代美術館ですから、展覧会のために新しい作品を、作ってもらって、そうすると、そのアーティストとの間に非常に、深い関係ができる。そして、その展覧会のために作ったということもあって、意味的にもですね、新しく本当に森美術館のために作られた作品というのを、その後収集していくという流れが、非常に自然になりました。そして、初代館長のデビッド・エリオットも、やはりミュージアムとしては、作品を収集していくということが、非常に重要な美術館の使命であるので、やはり収集をすべきではないかということで、開館して、1年半後ぐらいですね、2005年の夏に収集を始めましょうということになりました。ただ、一つはですね、その企業の美術館であるので、例えば、エムプラスとか、モマとかテートのように、世界的なコレクションをこれから始めましょうというほどの、予算も考えていなかったし、それからその美術館の責任としてもですね、コレクションをしながら、その土地の、その時代の歴史を描いていくというのは、国立公立美術館にお任せしたいと。むしろ展覧会を通して関係を作ってきたアーティストのものを集めていく。そして世界のこのターゲットとしてもですね、ナショナルギャラリーはサウスイーストエイジア、東南アジアに限定しているし、それからエムプラスは香港、東アジア、そして世界というふうに、香港を中心にした コレクションになってるんですけども、森美術館としても世界のコレクションを集めるのはとてもやっぱりハードルが高いので、まずはアジアの現代美術、基本的には90年代以降の作品を収集をするということにしようというのが森美術館のコレクションポリシーで、今はアジア太平洋という言い方をして、オーストラリアやニュージーランドもターゲットにはしようということにしていますが、それほど数としてはシェアは多くないです。で、もう一つの問題はノンコレクティングミュージアムとして始めたので、常設展示室っていうのがなかったんですね。つまり日本の美術館の多くはコレクションを見せるギャラリーと、それから企画展示室と半々ぐらいであるところが多いかもしれませんけども、その常設展示室の部分がなかったので、あるアーティストにですね、作品を購入したいというふうに言ったときに、森美術館を買ってくれるのは嬉しいんですけど、見せる場所ないでしょって言われて、確かにそうだなと。で、それをどういうふうに解決するのかというので、2015年に、改装を、したときに、行ったことがある方はいらっしゃるかどうかわかりませんが、窓のある、かなり開放的な部屋があって、そこをマムコレクションというシリーズの展覧会を見せる場所にしようと。なので、それほど大きくないので、一度にたくさんは見せることはできないんですけれども、コレクションを紹介する場所として、キュレーターが毎回、テーマを練って、あるいは個展にすることもありますけれども、展覧会をし始めたというのが2015年です。そして2019年になってやっと、そのコレクションの情報がウェブサイトに出ることになりました。今ほとんどバイリンガルで画像ついて出ていますけれども、ほぼすべての作品をご覧いただけるようになっています。で、どういうふうにコレクションが集まってどう展示してきたのかという、これ一番最初のマムコレクション001なんですけれども、小沢剛と下道元幸さんの2人で、2人ともアジア各地を旅をしながら作品を作ってきているというところのつながりで、この時はですね、本当に最初だったので、少しリビングルームにいるような感じでゆったりしてもらおうと思って、カーペットとソファーが真ん中にあって、ちょっとゆるゆるしてもらいながら見るという考えで作品を見せたんですが、コレクション以外にも少し資料を展示しようということで、この2人がですね、それぞれ違う時期にアジアを一人で旅をして回った時の、アーカイブを一緒に借用してですね、展示をしました。で、小沢さんは80年代末から90年代にかけて、この地蔵イングというシリーズで、モノクロの写真に、青い色をつけたこのシリーズで、本当に重要な、例えば天安門事件の直後の北京とか、そうした場所を回って写真を撮ったその時の、記録もですね、メモも見ると非常にその作品の理解が深まるというようなことで、それを下道さんと小沢さんと両方やりました。それから、これがウェブサイトの始まりのところになっていて、コレクションポリシーも書いてありますけれども、今は、だいたい460点ぐらい、先ほどの5000点に比べると全然少ない数ではありますけれども、この少ない中でも分析をしてみると、今のところ半分ちょっと以上が日本の作品ですね。で、東アジア、東南アジア、南アジアというふうになっていて、で、東南アジアは、展覧会を2017年サンシャワー展をやったので、そのリサーチのプロセスでかなりの数を購入しています。で、今回のワールドクラスルームにも結構出てますけれども、で、あとはメディアとしては、分析してみると、やはり、買いやすさということもあって、写真とビデオが多い。そして、インスタレーションもそれなりに買ってますね。で、平面作品が 22.5% ぐらいというような割合になっていて、こういうコレクションの分析をしていくと、写真はその点数が多いというのはセットでシリーズを購入したりするので、どうしても点数が多くなってしまうんですけれども、このバランスがどのくらいなのが適当であるのかという話をしたり、それから地域についても、継続してリサーチをしていかないといけないんですけれども、東アジア、東南アジア、南アジアについては、リサーチをしないとなかなか作品にも出会えないので、それをどうしていくのかっていうのが今後の課題であるということが見えてきます。 で、結果的には 44% の作品を展覧会から購入しています。2005年にそれは始まってますね。で、今、このアイ・ウェイウェイの、作品も見せていますけれども、これも2009年に、何によってという展覧会、個展をやった時に、購入をしています。もうこの時すでにすごく高くて、立体作品の大きなものは購入できなかったんですけども、写真を今持ってます。それから、小谷元彦の、幽体の近くという個展をした時にも、その個展のために作られた新作を、購入していて、これもなかなかコレクション展で見せることができなかったんですけれども、つい先日まで見せてました。それから韓国のイーブルの個展、これもこのアジアの中堅作家の個展のシリーズというのをかなりやっていまして、私自身も一時期個展ばっかり担当していた時期がありますけれども、この時もこの朝の曲というエスペラント語でできている、世界をどういうふうにつなげることができるのかというその理想の言語で、それが続かなかったんですけれども、そういう意味合いもあって、うまくいかなかった、ただユートピア的な思想を持ったタワーというようなことで、これも購入してます。それから、マムプロジェクトのシリーズは新作をコミッションするというのを、ある時期まで条件にしていまして、なので、このプロジェクトのために作ってもらった、山城千佳子さんの、肉屋の女という映像作品も非常に素晴らしい代表作の一つになったんじゃないかなと思ってます。それから、ディン・キューレイも個展の時に複数点購入をしていまして、このビジョン・イン・ダークネスというのと、それから今、ライト&ビリーフという、こちらの作品は、今回のワールドクラスルームで出していますね。それから、このマムコレクションの2番目に見せた、水道法とポーポーなんですけれども、このポーポーの、4点ありますが、実は5点セットですね、5点の作品で、ユージン・タンさんはこのアジアのミニマリズムの研究者でもありますけれども、シンガポールもお持ちのこのポーポーの初期のシリーズを、スタジオに行って作家に会って、で、その時に話を聞いて、もうその場で購入を決めてですね、早速見に行ってっていうような感じで購入してます。それから3社は先ほど言ったその東南アジアの展覧会では、2年ほどかけて、森美術館と、それから国立新美術館、そして、国際交流基金と3社共同でリサーチして展覧会を作りましたので、その時に出会った作品が非常にたくさんあって、その時にギャラリーのついてないアーティストもたくさんいましたから、スタジオビジットしながら、そのまま購入のプロセスをしたというようなものもいくつかあります。こちらもですね、今ワールドクラスルームに出ていますけれども、3社は後で、後から購入したものですね。これも購入してますね。で、あとは、2020年、このあたりで、コレクションの方針を少しだけ変えて、なかなかその数を増やしていくことができないという、それは、予算の問題もありながら、収蔵庫の問題もあって、で、なので、日本を代表するような作家の、主要な作品を数少なく持っていた方がいいんじゃないかと。それから、アジアの作家についてもいわゆるミュージアムピースと言われる大型の作品をきちんと集めていった方がいいんじゃないかということになって、で幻のオリンピック向けの展覧会になってしまったスターズ展、海外の人に見てもらえなかったんですが、この時に、出展してもらったアーティストの中で作品を所蔵していなかった、奈良さん、宮島達夫さん、それからリー・ユーファンの作品を、この2020年のスターズ展をきっかけに、3名の作品を購入しました。これも今出品してます。そしてアナザーエナジーでも三島公代さんに新作を作ってもらいましたので、こちらの手前のドラム缶の作品ですね。これも、コロナの中で、その時8歳だったかなの、三島さんが作ってくれたものを、本当に88歳になって代表作となるようなミュージアムピースができたので、これも購入しました。 それから、ヌヌン WS というインドネシアのアーティストなんですけども、彼女の作品は、なんとインドネシア大使がですね、の奥様がヌヌン WS と知り合いで、この大型の作品を寄贈をしてくださってですね、で、コレクションに加わることになりました。で、今見せている最も新しいワールドクラスルームのヤン・ヘギューなんですけども、先ほどユージンが見せたシンガポールの、ビエンナーレで出品をした本当に対になっているような、全部鈴がついていて、で1日に数回アクティベーションをしてパフォーマンスをしてくれる作品なんですけども、これも本展のために作ってもらって、買う気があるのかどうかというのを最初に聞かれたんですけど、それは買ってほしいということよりも前に、もしこの作品が日本に残るのであれば、日本にちなんだ作品にしたいというようなことを言われて、それは非常に理にかなっているなというふうに思ったので、いろいろな方法で購入をすることにしまして、無事に森美術館のコレクションになったというのが最新のコレクションです。で、ちょっとまとめてみますと、今回始めているハン・ネフケンス・ファンデーションのムービング・イメージ・アワード for Asian Artists。このコミッションの仕方は非常に冒頭でも申し上げましたが、新しくて、ただ非常に可能性があるなというふうに思っています。そして、ミュージアムピースにフォーカスをしていて、数少なく、持ちたいと。それから、新しく、森美術館のためにコミッションしてもらうことも非常に重要だし、どういうふうにその後コレクションをシェアしていけるのかというようなことを考えていって、それぞれのコレクション作品で、どのような物語をですね、皆さんに伝えていくことができるのか。そして、この美術館のコレクションというものが、未来に向けて、どういう責任を果たしていけるのかということを、考えながらですね、今後、森美術館としてはコレクションを、続けていきたいと思ってますけれども、本当に数を増やすということではなく、本当にクオリティを求めていきたいというふうには思ってます。ちょっと長くなりました。以上です。
はい、片岡館長、ありがとうございました。では続きましてディスカッションの方に移りたいと思います。英語で進行させていただきます。So now we would like to move on to discussion. Okay. Yeah, and it's firstly, I'm gonna talk about this joint commission project very briefly, just give the audience the fact. It's a little bit repetitive, but just avoid misunderstanding. So the first edition of this moving image commission was conducted in the year 2021, and it's focusing on moving image. The prize of $100,000 is given to an artist or artist collective of Asian origin or Asian nationality or living in Asia and aged 35 and above. And the first edition's winner was announced in October 2021. And you can see the portrait of the winning artist, who is Gwen Chin Thi. She's from Vietnam. And so she's spending 18 months to complete the newly commissioned work. And each edition of that new work will go into these 3 museums collection, as well as the foundation owning the viewing copy of the piece. And also, each museum will have the presentation of her new work one by one. And at the moment, we are planning to have the first presentation in Singapore, Eugene. Is it correct?
Yes, in January 2024, next year.
And that's going to be coincide with the Art Week event?
Yes, the exhibition will open during Singapore Art Week. That's when we have art fair, art SG, as well as a lot of other activities in the art scene in Singapore. Yeah.
And the second presentation will be made in Hong Kong.
That's right. It'll be at M+. It'll be part of a major collection hang at the museum, curated by our Chanel Kong, who is in our moving image team, together with Silke Schmickel. And they are working across the disciplines, as we always do. And her work, Trinty's work, will be seen in a collection, display and exhibition under the title of Shan Shui, which is looking at landscape. So many ink artworks, works from the SIG collection of contemporary Chinese art, together with works that include Liu Fan, as well as many other objects as well. So it's very nice for us to see how a moving image intersects with a collection of mid-20th and into 21st century that is visual culture, that is more than just art or just moving image. And it is interesting to be able to expand what an understanding of this work would be, precisely because it sits next to others in the M+ collection.
Eugene, would you like to add something to your presentation about Chinji's work, or it's okay?
Yeah, no, yes, it'll be a solo presentation.
Yeah, okay. Then Mori is gonna have the third presentation of the work, and
Yes, we'll be showing in a slot that starts from April 24. But Singapore and M+ will be showing Tinti's work for a few months, or like nearly half a year. Then we start at the end of April. So after we start showing at the end of April, which run till beginning of September, so at a certain time, all three museums are showing same work at the same time, which I think is quite interesting. And our exhibit will be at our MUM collection space. So, and we don't know much about the work yet, but we know that it's not a single channel, it will be multi-channel work. So we have to see how we can display the work, but it's fun parts that we are all waiting for what kind of work is coming up.
Han, would you like to add anything about this commission project?
Yes, so this was the first meeting we had. It was online, of course. It was Zoom because of the pandemic. And that was also, I knew Eugene before, but I hadn't met Mami and Sahanya yet. So this is a little bit awkward to be talking about what moves us and what we're going to choose when you see people only on a screen. So I must say that's why I'm so very, very happy to be here now and be with them in person. There's a very different, let's say, dynamic and a very different warmth and electricity when you meet each other. And from that, we talk obviously about the commission, but we talk also about lots of other things that have to do with art, what our role is within the art, or the questions that we have, for example, about selecting the candidates, what do we look for, and what will be the identity of the commission as well. And those are things that you can really only talk in person about, because they evolve organically while you are talking. So that's why I'm so happy to be here. And I'm also very happy because I'm going to be here again in April, and I'm going to be in Singapore and in Hong Kong and see the work in a different situation. So for me, this is all just one big celebration.
Maybe we can talk about how we came to the final artist, the process.
Yes. I think actually, if I look at the process in 2021 and the process now, it's a little bit different. I feel that perhaps in the beginning, in the first of it, we're sort of feeling our way, all of us, and we feel so much more familiar with each other now, and that made it much more easy to come to to a selection and to an understanding, let's put it that way, again about the criteria, because this is really so important. What do you base it on? Do you want to give the commission sort of as an award for an artist as a celebration of their career so far? Or so do you want to have a very established artist as the commission winner, which gives, of course, the commission a certain status? But there are many awards like that already in the world, so that might not be what we're waiting for. So I feel that we're coming to understand that we would like to give the commission to the artist that has shown already their potential, that has an interesting trajectory so far, but the commission, also because of the money involved, will be the extra push that the artists need to go perhaps in an area that they haven't been before. Because of course, if you're an artist and working by yourself and you're making a work, you have to see that it becomes accepted, that it's sold because you have to make a living, and that it's shown because that's why you make the artwork. In this case, all these elements are already taken care of. So the artist has the luxury of really making a work that they might not have been able to make otherwise, and that makes it much more exciting.
I think I might add that how we arrived at a long list included inviting nominees, curators that we have each of us, each institution nominated, to go and provide us with a long short list to then consider where we would, how we would then end up with a single artist. So this also is a very interesting process for the three museums.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead,
No,
Eugene.
I was going to just add that, the fact that it wasn't us actually selecting the list of artists, a long list, was an interesting process that it was chosen.
It is an interesting process, and one of the reasons why the Han Nefkens Foundation itself does not nominate an artist is to guarantee the purity, as it were, of guiding the conversation. I don't want to have an agenda and sort of, by asking certain questions, make sure that you're all going to choose the artist that we would like you to choose. That's not at all the case. Any artist it's your decision. But so I say I don't have an agenda, but I felt really during our conversation yesterday that neither of you three had an agenda in that sense. There were obviously favorites, but all of you seemed to be open to the four candidates that we selected. And that gives us, I think, an enormous freedom to grow, in a sense. Because if you have an agenda, it stops there. And in our case, we're all exploring the different possibilities.
It's nice to see this Han Nefkens website showing the scouts which nominated the long list. So each museum selected 3 scouts, who each scout has to nominate 2 artists. Then, so 9 scouts by 2 artists, so 18 artists that we had to look, and then each artist had maybe 5 or 6 links of the works. So actually, judging the moving image takes enormous amount of time.
Yes, it does. yes.
Once you start, you realize, oh my God, it's going to take so much time. But then it's such a learning experience for all of us. So all of us, the directors, do not make a judgment by ourselves. We open the links to all the curators in the team. So everyone in the team also has to look at 18 artists. buy 5 works by probably like 15 to 30 minutes. So, but then it's internal meeting that we each of us had before we met yesterday was also very interesting, that who thinks that what works would be suitable for our collection.
Can I also add that when we make the selections, we actually make a selection of 3 or 4 finalists.
Right.
And then the process is that we ask them to present to us again, the finalists, what they would do if they did secure the final $100,000. And it is at that point that the single artist is selected. So it's many steps.
It's multi-levered, and in that sense, there are different screens, as it were, the artist goes through. So on the one hand, it is an adventure because we don't know what the end product will be, but it's very thoroughly screened.
It's also a process of discovery because we discover artists that we were not familiar with, for example.
Yes, very much.
I would add that from the museum perspective, this is an extremely adventurous way of collecting, because institutions are, and to enter into a collection is a very big deal, and we take a lot of time to discuss and assess. It goes through internal curatorial process, and then it has to go through the governance of institutions. So we are very careful about what enters collection. So this is very unique. I said pioneering, and I really do mean that.
Yeah, and I go back to what Mami was saying, that we still don't know what Trinity is going to be making, how we're going to be showing the work. And this, I suppose, is one of the challenges of commissioning art, and it goes back to the topic of our conversation today about preserving contemporary art. And the key word here is preserving, where all our museums, when we build collections, we are trying to preserve the work in a certain way. But when we commission, we are opening up the possibilities to what we don't really know exists yet. So it's a tension between this idea of preservation, but preserving something that we don't know is a commitment that we are making.
And if I look at it from the artist point of view, of course, this is a wonderful opportunity to make a work and to have it shown in 3 different institutions, but it's also pretty intimidating, actually, to know that you have an exhibition at 3 such important museums. So I can also understand why they sometimes are a little bit reluctant to talk about the work until they're really there.
I also like the fact that condition of the selection of the artists is now 35 and above. There are many awards or competition for young artists.
Yeah.
So 35 or younger, we see it often. But there's not much chance for the mid-career artist, and not too established, but the artists who have set some kind of style or way of working, but then they need a larger production funding to go to the next stage.
Exactly, yes.
And Han, if I understand correctly, you are doing sort of, say, new commissioning projects or giving out grants to artists, and you are doing it 6-7 per year?
Yes, we have different grants. We have a grant, and all of them are together with different art institutions in Europe and in Asia, because we think it's very important for Asian artists to be shown also in Europe. So we have our partners in Europe as well. You can see the grants here. The one in Southeast Asia is new. We had the first meeting in February, and a wonderful artist was shown, of which I'm sure you will learn more in the future. And then we have another one. We also have as you can see here, the biennials that we work with, the Busan Biennial, the Guangzhou Biennial, because this is a chance for an artist to be seen there, but it's also support for the biennials, because they like to have productions, of course. So we collaborate with them as well. We have grants for all of Asia. We have grants for Southeast Asia. We have grants for South Asia. And we have grants for West Asia, which is really what's known, I think, wrongly known as the Middle East, because it's east from Europe, but not east from many other countries, and the Central Asian republics. And then we're also talking about different grants that, in this case, will be based more on a theme, like virtual reality or immigration. But we're in the process of consolidating the different art institutions that we work with. But that's interesting as well, to start working not so much in a geographic area, but according to a theme, which means it opens up to worldwide artists.
I just saw the Meiro Koizumi's new commission work at the Guangzhou Biennale, the beautiful, and that was also supported by the Han Nefkens. So how did this happen? Where the story starts?
I think the story really starts because we get to know so many people. And so we know the curator of the Guangzhou Biennale, as we know the one from Busan and the one from Istanbul. This is our network that's been growing. So the moment they become, it's announced that they become the curators, we immediately contact them and say, if there's an artist that you feel that we should support and we produce with you, please let us know. So generally they give us several options, and then we, in this case Hilda and myself, look at the artist that we feel is most appropriate for us to get to know. So this is also for us another way to get to know artists that we might not have worked with or known before.
So Han, can I ask you a little bit more about this joint commission project? So a viewing copy of Tinji's work will go into your collection, or at least you will own it. And
No. Sorry to interrupt. No.
So can you clarify it?
It's very different.
Yeah.
When we started out with our different grants, we asked for a copy of the work that was made, and we really did so without thinking. We this is kind of the normal, right? You produce something, you pay for it, you get something in return, a copy. But then we realized, so what are we going to do with all those works? What are we going to do with all those video works? Are we going to donate them later to a museum? And if so, why should we actually collect them now? Why not have our own copy, but allow for the artist to sell that copy, because video works are mostly made in an edition of 6. So if we're working with 3 or 4 art institutions that each get a copy, the poor artist is left with only 1 or 2 copies to sell. So we said, no, we don't want a copy. We give it to the artist to sell. And if we're going to show the work, we ask the artist to give us a viewing copy for the time that we're going to show the work, and then we give it back to the artist. And the idea is that we want to be light, and we want to be flexible, and we don't want to be burdened by possessions.
Thank you. Yeah, that's very amazing project.
But you can also talk that this video art production grant, also it doesn't go to the collection, right?
No. There is no collection anymore. There is a collection, but we're going to donate it to the MACBA in Barcelona, and perhaps to other museums as well. And then we will have no collection left.
I should say, as a museum director, I work with many collectors and foundations, and to encounter this, it's an existential philosophy that is very, I think it's extraordinary. It's almost the opposite of what collectors normally do, which is to hold on to things, and we're continually persuading them to let them go, and this is the total opposite. So it's extraordinary, and I think the world needs more of people like Hans Nefkens.
Well, thank you very much. But I think one of me is enough.
I also feel that I think you are collecting experience.
Absolutely.
And by
Absolutely.
doing this joint project and producing new work with artists, it's such a joy to learn about someone else from different parts of the planet. And but by going through all the process, you know that person better, and also you're visiting Tinti in Vietnam, and so understanding surroundings and everything. Then you gain all these experiences and relationship, but you don't have to possess anything, which I think is so beautiful.
Yes, but that's absolutely true. We were in Vietnam in February for one of our selection meetings, and we've been working with several artists in Vietnam, Dinh Qui Le, and Tri, of course, herself, and Tao, Nguyen Phan, and now with her husband, Tung. So after the and we come back to this thing that will always come back when I talk, then that's about the joy of having meals together with other people. So after the meeting, we went to a very nice restaurant. We obviously, as a foreigner, I would never have found that restaurant. And they were all sitting at the table, and the Southeast Asian culture is so inclusive. So it was not only the artists that came, but some of their friends and people that had been involved somewhere else. So there were about 20 people, and they were all sitting I was sitting back sort of looking at it, and they were all sitting at the table and talking with each other, people getting to know each other. And I thought, oh, this is so wonderful. It is, and at that moment, I felt very content that through our actions, people were meeting each other and we're all having this good time, this sense of warmth and belonging. And to me, that's worth so much more than owning something.
No, I think that's a very, very pertinent point when we think about collections. I mean, nowadays it's really about possession and unfortunately also about speculation and profit. But the original idea of collection was really holding in custody for future generations, which is what museums do, preserving these collections for future generations to learn and understand the art of the past. Right? So I think that's a very good example that you're setting, that it's really not about possession.
Ken, I think you collected some other examples of collaborative acquisition.
Yes. So next one. I just picked up some examples of collection sharing randomly, and so this one, Christian Marclay's video work, The Clock, and it was exhibited at the Venice Biennale in 2012, and the artist won the Golden Lion Prize. And this work was jointly acquired by 3 museums like Tate, Pompidou Center, and Israel Museum in Jerusalem. And the interesting point is that so they share one edition. They don't own each edition, but just one edition is being shared. And so presentation at the 3 museums will be coordinated so that the work is only ever on view at one venue at any one time. So that's the mechanism of joint acquisition. And Sahania, and I heard that you own a video piece.
So we also collaborated with Tate on the acquisition of a work by Hong Kong artist Samson Young, and acquired in a very similar way. But it is, so far it's only been on moving image work where we're able to achieve this. And not all museums can do it because of, the local governance that is managed around this.
Don't you think that in the future this is going to change? just because of sustainability considerations and, of course, financial considerations as well?
I agree. I was just going to say that I think this is really the way to go forward. But unfortunately for us in Singapore, our collections, both of the National Gallery at SEM, are part of the National Collection of Singapore. And that comes with their own rules and policies of governance. So it's very difficult for us to co-own something, particularly with an institution that's not based in Singapore.
Also, Mami-san, we've never done such a thing yet.
We haven't co-owned the work. And but thinking that most of the museums have an enormous amount of a collection, but only very little percentage of the work is on display at one time. So thinking about all that fact, like universal condition of all the museums, then it's possible to share, and particularly the moving images, that there's no extra sort of shipping or cost. But I know that Tate Modern shared the work with MCA in Sydney. And so they did the research together, and then shipping is sponsored by Qantas. So there's other system, not only limiting to the moving image, but actual object or painting can be shared. And in terms of sustainability, I think the shipping occurs from one continent to the other is also problematic. So we have to think what is the best way to do.
Yeah, so as Mami-san mentioned, now Unique Piece is jointly acquired by a few museums too. And I'm showing you an example of Maurizio Cattelan's work, jointly owned by the Dallas Museum of Art and the Menil Collection in Houston. And also, yeah, it's a little bit extreme example. Performance work can be editioned and owned by museums. And Tino Segal, performance artist, his piece called "This is Propaganda" is entirely immaterial, has never been captured on film or in photographs, and does not have a format, written acquisition record. The performance itself takes place inside a gallery and consists of a set of precise actions undertaken by one employed performer dressed as an official gallery attendant. And this work is an edition of 4, and one of which is owned by Tate. And I'm just raising it, talking about this as an extreme example, I suppose. And any comment?
Yeah, I was just commenting to Sahania that we would never be able to acquire a work like this, for example.
We actually do have a work by Tino Segal at the M Plus collection. And it is, the thing is that there are artists like Tino who deliberately make proposals that push the institution to really think about how do they value collection building, art, what is art, these questions. And that is in fact the practice. Mm-hmm. And so we as institutions are challenged and have to find ways of, if we are very serious about the engagement, to be flexible or to be able to be very persuasive with the acquisition committees of the museums, so that they can also be responsive. And it is, Tino's work is really also thinking about impermanence. It could easily be that if the instructions disappear, because it is entirely material, the work in itself might disappear. And I think that those are propositions that he is very interested in and perhaps happy to put on the table. And I think it is, when we go into the area of conservation and how long you preserve something and why one does it, because we do it as custodians for the future, that it is also not out of the questions that some things will not last forever. And maybe that is okay too.
So, as far as I understand, there's kind of research on how to collect the performative work has been conducted in many places from the 2010s, if I remember correctly. And this is one of the examples, initiated by Tate and, Van Nap Museum and Dutch Research Institute. So 3 institutions jointly conducted this project, for example. And next thing I would like to raise a little bit is a problem of maintain videotapes and DVD discs and etc. when it comes to video works. And now digitization of these old media work has been conducted in many places. And one of the organization who is doing this task is based in Amsterdam. And this organization is called Lima. And it says Lima conserves, manages, and digitizes media artworks by more than 500 individual artists and over 50 collections. All work is stored in our electronic depot. Their clients include Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam and Van Nappe Museum in Eindhoven, and amongst others, and etc. And
so I can say, because of the particular aspects of the M+ collection, which include, very substantial holdings of paintings and sculptures, of course, but also time-based media. And we do have a time-based media conservator, but these are rare individuals. To find conservators who are understanding how to manage time-based work. And it is an ongoing challenge, as well as a conversation between institutions in Sydney, in London, that we are part of, to help expand the knowledge, because it's something we have to share, but at the same time, this is core business for our museums, and so many. If we think about new things that happened in our time, moving image art has to be one of those new things. It's very rare that something new happens, and it was with cinema that happens in not in our lifetime, not in my lifetime, earlier than that, but certainly moving image works becomes very important. New media works become very important in the last 30 years. And so, and increasingly so, as we have digital cameras on our phones. So this is a media that is going to increase, and we as 21st century institutions interested in this kind of content need to expand how we conserve, how we preserve, and it is not. It's an evolving conversation. It's not something that we all know what that really looks like yet, but we have shafts of light going into that very dark room.
Your conservation lab has all the different equipments for all the different medium, from record player to digitizing everything. It's impressive how much you have in all different kinds of player.
So we feel very committed to ensuring that within Asia that there is a conservation facility that has begun that work, and we will seek partners in the region, because it needs to be more than just M+. We hope that there will be others in Asia that are working on this content, because of course our collections are primarily from the region, and we have a commitment to making that that preservation work last. But we are also working very hard to develop conservation and time-based conservation skills within Hong Kong and beyond. But that requires university partners.
But usually also in Singapore, you have different museums, but the actual sort of management and conservation is by the National Heritage Board, which is a different institution.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, all the museums in Singapore, not just the National Gallery and SAM, but also the National Museum, the Asian Civilizations Museum, and some of the smaller ones, all their collections belong to the National Collection. And so it's all stored centrally at this place called the Heritage Conservation Center, which is a purpose-built facility. I think it's about 20 years old now. But they're running out of space very quickly, so they're looking to build another facility. And all preservation and conservation work of all the collections are done there. So it's a central. And this time-based media is something that we're also developing together with them.
I think the other thing that we have realized is that contemporary conservation, material conservation, so we're looking at plastics and so on, there is no training in Greater China. I think there is in Australia, there is in Europe. So for us, we really do need to build that capacity into Asia. There are good conservators in the more traditional areas, but not in non-traditional contemporary material culture that we have to build capacity.
So even the training of conservators is something very lacking definitely in Southeast Asia. You probably have some in Japan and Taiwan and Australia, the closest we have to Southeast Asia. Actually.
And Eugene, I've been to this center as well, and it's massive, and it's highly secured, a high security place.
Yes.
I was surprised.
Yes. Yes. But like I said, they're running out of space, and the registrars there get a bit upset with SAM when we buy very large-scale works. So you remember Ding Kulei's helicopter, which we recently acquired, for example. And they asked me, why are you buying a helicopter? What does this got to do with art, for example? But they just have to figure out how to store this work for us once we acquire them.
I can share that part of the curatorial discussions, and our curatorial teams are learning this, is that the need to also have early conversations with registrars and conservators about an acquisition process, because it does need that input, so that when you do finally make the decision about the acquisition, we do have the head of conservation and the head of registration in the room with the acquisition subcommittee of the board, because often there'll be questions directed to the conservator about an acquisition, and it's and what the longevity is, or what does it mean, because some of, as we know, contemporary art goes all over the place and uses all kinds of material that is quite well, it tests all of us.
Yeah, I think it's also what's also required is a change in mindset, because as I said, a lot of our conservators want to preserve a work of art in a kind of specific form, in its final form. So I always say when a work is collected by a museum, it kind of dies in a way. Whereas contemporary art, there are some forms of contemporary art that needs to continue to live, right? Not just activated in the form of instructions that are then performed or activated, but artists working in ways that continue to evolve, the work continues to evolve. And that's something our conservators find very hard to accept, that the work cannot change once it's entered our collection.
I think for me, the most poetic example of this, and actually most challenging at the same time, was working with artist Lee Ming-wei on a project for Queensland Art Gallery, where we commissioned him to do a work for the Gallery of Modern Art, a new museum. And it was actually the planting of a Bodhi tree, a tree sapling from Anuradhapura, where the Buddha had reached enlightenment and a sapling had come to Sri Lanka. So this is a very complex project, but the plant was eventually came to Brisbane and was planted, but that tree is part of a collection, and the collection of the Queensland Art Gallery, and it needed to go through an entire series of conversations about this thing which was going to change and become an enormous tree. And we know that Ficus religiosa, which is the Bodhi tree, will live probably much longer than the building itself, because they are ancient. They live for thousands of years. And so this fabulous challenge to say, how do we preserve this tree that might even last longer than the museum? And in the end, it was a collaboration, and collaborations, is important when we're sitting here, between the botanical gardens and a monastery and the museum, to say, yes, we will all three work together to make this work and make this tree continue. And it continues to this day. And it's a brilliant thing that an artist does. It's planted a seed that went all over the place, but expanded communities in the most beautiful way.
So they do like festival every year at certain times so that people remembers about the tree.
Yes, the Buddha's birthday, the Vesak festival is always marked at the museum around this tree. And it has actually gathered all the different Buddhist faiths, because we worked with a particular Taiwanese monk and an abbess actually, and her monastery, but they work with the Korean Buddhists, the Indians, and they all come together. And the museum then became the site for this gathering, and it continues every year. And it marks the beginning of the Vesak festival, the Buddha's Light festival, on that full moon every year.
I think we should also do Han Nefkens Festival every 2 years.
Well, you will on the 24th of April next
We
year.
will, that's right, every 2 years.
Unfortunately, we are sort of approaching to the end of the talk, but now I would like to have some questions from the audience.
東京芸術大学のリー・ミナです。こんにちは。非常にインスピレーションに富んだお話を今日聞かせていただいてありがとうございます。質問ではなくインスピレーションをいただいたので、私の経験の中から今後こういうことが必要なんではないかという問いかけを一つさせていただきたいと思います。お話を聞いていて、非常に強く感じたのが、作家が作品を作ること、今までは昔は10年ぐらい前まではでしょうか、作家が作品を作られた作品を美術館がコレクション、美術館またはコレクターがコレクションする。でその作品が劣化していったらば修復家の出番になって、その修復家が元の状態をキープしようとする。こういう時間の流れがあったと思うんですけれども、今これが同時に起こっていると思うんです。作家は、作りながらその作品をどうやってキープするかということを作った瞬間に考えなければならない。特にタイムベースの作品の場合はテクノロジーが進んでいってしまうために、次にこの作品をきちんと見せるためには作るだけではなくてキープしていく方法というのを考えなければならなくなった。そうするとコレクションするコレクターや美術館は作家が進んでいくのと同じスピードでそのテクノロジーも含めて一緒に歩いていかなければいけなくなった。そういう中でこれからものとして所蔵するだけではなくて、どうやって一緒に歩いていかれるのか、どうやって一緒に作っていかれるのかということにも美術館は作ることそのものに寄り添う時代になったんだなということを非常に強く感じます。実は2年3年前から私はアーカイブということを一つテーマに大学の中でクラスを 持っているんですけれども、そこにアーティストやコンサベーターをゲストとして招いていろいろなことをお話ししてもらっているんですね。そこで感じるのが、アーティストがコンサベーターを非常に必要としている。どうやって自分の作品をキープしていかれるのかということを非常に作りながら必要としているというのは、ということから、これはアーカイブすることというのは保存するだけではなくて作るためにも必要なんじゃないかというふうに感じておりました。今日のお話を伺ってその思いが一層強くなったんですが、これから、作ることを応援するために、その作ることとキープしていくこと、その状態をキープしていくことを一緒に行える人を育てていくことというのが非常に大事なんじゃないかなと思います。今そのテクニックを持っている人は、個人で活動していて、作家がプライベートにコネクションを持っている、そういう人が点々と存在している状態なんですけれども、なんとかそういう点々と存在する個人がもっとつながれるようになって、美術館やファウンデーションやコレクターと、それからアーティストたちともつながれるようなプラットフォームができていったら素晴らしいのではないかなというふうに感じました。
Yes, no, I think what you've just said it's great. I think that should be the way it is that artists think about how their works are conserved and preserved in the future. But sadly, very few artists think about that.
Yes.
So it's for us museums, when we acquire work and the artist is still alive, we get the artists to work with our conservators to see how they can preserve the work, and also finding alternative ways to represent the works if the materials are very fragile and they will degrade, for example.
Yeah, I think I agree very much with Eugene. When an artist makes a work, the last thing they think about is how it's going to be conserved. In fact, they don't even think about if it's going to be sold, or they're so enthralled in the process of making their work and in exploring that those are considerations that come afterwards. But I think there's a role, this is very well pointed out, there's a role for museums and for curators to guide the artists here.
But also sometimes it's good that if artists think about the longevity of the work, just for the moment that exists, but it doesn't stay like that forever. So the curators and museums should really look at the medium or type of the works. It doesn't have a time-based character, but it should happen like that too, like some of the works. So not every work can be preserved. So how do we do it? Because there's so many type of works are kind of being produced at the moment. But when we look at the market, for instance, probably 90% of the works are object-based, like a physically existing. There's so many works that doesn't physically exist. So how do we do that as a museum is also another channel that we need to discuss.
That's very true. But I think your comment points again at the importance of collaboration. And I think that's this theme that has come back time and again here, that only when we collaborate can we achieve what we want to achieve.
Thank you all the speakers for generously sharing your experience. I think the idea of commissioning is ambitious enough, and now we're talking about co-commissioning. So it's really like a lot of commitment that all the institutions have to work collectively to work together with the artists, but also down the line how to preserve the work. But from a curatorial perspective, I think as a curator, who we commission or what we collect is always kind of driven by the narrative that we're building uniquely. So like for M+, and also for SEM, and also for for Mori Art Museum, we all have very different narrative that we're trying to build. So my question would be like how much that the narrative that we're building, each institution is building, has actually played a role in your processes of identifying the artists and or even like the project you're commissioning for this time. Thanks.
This is a very good question because this is what we talked about yesterday exactly. How are we going to choose an artist that fits in the narrative of all three different museums? And somehow, I must say, that is possible.
So I should disclose that Isabella there is one of my curators from M+, who's here on a sabbatical. But she asked a very good question, and one of the very interesting parts of the conversation yesterday was hearing different points of view. And in fact, our curators from SAM and M+ were also zooming in. And it was a really expansive discussion as a result of those voices coming in and explaining why they think this and not that, and vice versa. So it was a critical part of the discussion.
And yesterday, we were looking at the artists who had been shown quite frequently already internationally in a film festival. So some artists are more working in a film context, but this person hasn't really been shown in a contemporary art context. But the medium is almost the same. So the M+ has film curator and the media curator, and then different voices came in. And also regionally, there are still the regions in Asia that none of our museum had been sort of researched enough, so that if the work's coming from unknown part of Asia, that was interesting for all of us to look into deeper. So there's still a lot of overlapping parts that we hadn't really studied enough.
The unexplored parts. And if I may put this in a broader context, this is really the key question for all of us when we collaborate. We all have, the museums have their narratives, but we as people also have our own narrative. And how do we collaborate with other people who have a very different narrative? Where to find the common ground? That's very important.
私は日本のパブリックミュージアムでメディアアートやビデオアートのキュレーションとコンサベーションに関わる仕事を10年近くやってきました。でその中で、文化庁と京都市立一律芸術大学の文化芸術資源センターと一緒に、マターズ・イン・メディア・アートというデートモダンとモマ、などが共同で作ったタイムベースメディアに対するコンサベーションのガイドラインというのを参照して、日本バージョンというものを、作ることの研究グループをしていた関係で ZKM やデートモダンなどのコンサベーションターと一緒にタイムベースメディアに関するシンポジウムを開いたりとかっていう活動を行って、いました。で、こちらのコミッションワークの、に関するプロジェクトは非常に興味深く、感じておりまして、で、一つ今の、若いアーティストたちと仕事をしていく中で、テクニカルライダーを作っていくっていうことのノウハウ自体を持っている人も非常に限られているっていうことが一つと、またそのコンサベーションを前提とした上で収集してその後何十年と、保管されていく未来っていうものを想像した上でのガイドラインを、アーティストたちに伝えていく場所というものが非常に必要だなというふうに感じております。でそれがファンデーションの今回の試みの中で、どの程度含まれていくことになるのか、あるいはそれが実践されていく中でそういった試みの実践というものが今後公開されていく可能性があるのかということと、もう一つ、デジタルデータのユニーク性というものを担保する上で NFT という技術が出てきた、ブロックチェーンという技術が出てきたと。でそういった新しい、環境が出てきていることと、あとその映像や、プログラミングベースのものだけではなくメタバースのような既存の、コンシューマー向けのサービスを使った作品なども出てきていると。そうすると仕組みシステムサービスが終了してしまった時点で 再現不可能になってくるものが生まれてくるという可能性があると思いますね。そういった多様なメディアの中で表現される時代性と、仕組み、時代精神みたいなものと、仕組みとを今後継承するということについてどのようにお考えでしょうかという質問です。
I will start by saying that M Plus we have not collected in the NFT area yet. We've just made an exhibition of one object because we were exploring and trying to come to terms with understanding. So still working it out, not settled. And it's an area that's clearly going to grow, and so we are doing a lot of research. Curators, registrars and conservators together, and in dialogue with international institutions. The Pompidou, LACMA, they've just announced 2 major groups of acquisitions on on the blockchain. And also in Basel, there is knowledge that will be shared. Unknown yet, but we will try. In terms of the commission and where it sits in relation to media, I think at this point we feel it's within the known space of working with moving image, and I don't think any of us feel anxiety around the form that it will take. It may be multi-channeled, it may be single-channel. It's up to the artist working on the project and then making the presentation.
Yeah, actually, in one of our grants, we had an artist that was working partially in VR, and there were some concerns because this was new, and the art institutions that we worked with were not told ahead of time because we didn't know, obviously, that was VR. So not all of them were in a position to show that. So that's why we decided to do a commission on purely VR works. And for me, that's going to be a huge learning process because I know very little of it.
I was just going to say, like Suhanya, we're still looking into it and we haven't collected any NFTs yet.
すいません、今の NFT っていう意味がですね、いわゆるマーケットにおけるで使われている NFT アートというものではなくて、そのデジタルデータが何個複製されているか、複製制限数を定義することができるっていうことの技術ですね。というのは、今までデジタルアートの作品として購入したりとか、映像作品のデータを購入しても、無限に、エディションを決めても無限に複製できてしまうっていう現状があるというのが、理解なんですが、その複製制限とか利用状況というものをスマートコントラクトの中で定義することができるようになってきているということなので、そういったことが、デジタルアート、デジタル技術を使っているすべての作品に通底する、今後の技術として出てきているというふうに理解していったんですが、そのNFT アートと言われているものではなくて、そのコンサベーションとか収集保存といったところに使える新技術としてのお話を伺っておりました。すいません。
多分そこまで美術館を追いついてないんで。
そうですよね。
はい、
すいません。はい、
なので今後もちろん技術は確実に発展していくので、それとその作品の制作のメディアムということじゃなくて、山口さん言うようにどういうふうにそのデータを管理していくかとか、違法な複製を避けることができるのかとかっていうところにも新しいメディアは技術は使われていくことになると思うんですけども、本当にその追っかけっこというか、新しい技術ができればそれによる作品もできてくるし、それをどういうふうに管理していくのかっていうことも出てくるし、それから古いメディアが見られなくなるようなこともやっぱり起こってくるので、その辺はどういう時代を美術館が過ぎ去っていくのかっていう、それを見ながらですね、さっきサーニャが言ったように、この美術館業界全体でそれをやっぱり情報を共有して、その知識をやっぱり ぱ広めていくことっていうのはすごく重要なことかなというふうに思います。多分それぞれの間にデジタルコンサベーターが必ずいるという姿もなかなか特に日本ではまだ難しいと思うので、そういう情報をどういうふうに国公立の美術館も共有していけるのかっていう、その対話のチャンネルを作っていくことは急務かなというふうに思います。
So we'd like to close the session now, and yes, please. So I would love to say thank you very much for all the panelists today.